first. So I'm Elliot Jobe, Chief Innovation Officer for Infinite Reality. We've been around for about 2 years since COVID hit, kind of hyper-accelerated us from a lot of Hollywood entertainment type projects to interactive and how to socialize around these things and connect people at a distance. And prior to that, like I said, I spent about 20 years in technology and entertainment in a lot of different ways and things that apply to Metaverse and to events.
Great, I'm Bobby. I just met Elliot earlier. This is great. It's great to see this room still full because this topic really applies to all the brands and the companies that are represented here. We're going to drill down into something that is going to be impactful for everybody. What Non-Fun Events does is we offer experiences as a service. We support the planning, marketing, and execution of others' events, and we're building a semi-decentralized, decentralized ecosystem to support that. We're also building technology that tokenizes and gamifies events so that event guests can get paid out in cryptocurrency and NFTs for engaging different activities like coming to this talk. Nova is one of our advisors. I've known her for a while, and this is my first opportunity meeting her. I love it, and there's been a great crowd here today. I'm looking forward to talking with more of you folks.
Yeah, and I'm Lorraine, as you guys know, and super excited. I've been in the fashion industry and media space for many years. We won't be specific on that. And events are a really big part of what we do in terms of engaging our communities and creating experiences. And as an advisor and strategist in the space where we create events and build spaces and places in the metaverse, this is a really topical conversation. So excited to dive in. So our first question is, why metaverse events and what problems can be solved using virtual events for meeting spaces?
I think that the answer is pretty obvious there. That there's the lowest hanging fruit. The obvious answer is, the last 2 years have driven everybody to the need for a virtual event space. We've realized that pretty quickly. I think before that, we were all anticipating and eager for ways to reach out to colleagues and partners across the globe in more meaningful ways and to try and nurture those relationships in the best way possible. And so Zoom is pretty limiting in that regard. I mean, I think some of us watched our stock, tenfold when this pandemic hit, and there's going to be the 100x's associated with this emerging market. So this is really exciting to see. So I think that those meaningful relationships are at the heart of what we need here.
Yeah. Well, I think, the beautiful part of the metaverse is that it's live, right, relative to social and things that came before it, right? So it's got this immediacy. So event's probably a broad description if you want it to be, right? Even a Zoom meeting in a sense is an event, but there's like a moment in time where there's something that's going to happen that's going to draw people in simultaneously to be there, to then share in that live interactive experience and then amplify each other's emotional response. A lot of things today in the metaverse, when you have low numbers, are you wander into a theme park and it's like being by yourself at Disneyland, which probably for some people is amazing, but you miss that group amplification. Or going to a movie theater, that impact is that most of the people laugh at the same joke that you're laughing at, and as social animals, it makes it incredibly fun. So you need those beats, those moments in time to draw people in, even if you have a persistent economy or space form.
Yeah, I think both of you hit both those points on the head with in the physical world, using the hybrid approach to assist and amplify those events. And then being in the digital world, great, you have a digital world, now what? And so giving reason for people to come back and keep coming back, I think what events do as well. What are the greatest challenges that you find right now in creating virtual events? And how can we solve them?
Where do you want to start?
I think he mentioned it earlier, the interactivity of it, like finding good ways for people to interact. Some of the virtual worlds that exist right now for meeting spaces are pretty limiting in the number of people that can occupy a certain space at a certain time. So making that feedback meaningful again, like we can have this many people in a room, but again, not every virtual world would even afford a live projection or an avatar representation of what's happening right now. So building the infrastructure and then the interoperability, which has been a big buzzword here today, is critical.
Yeah, and probably making it relevant, making the event relevant for people who are already spending a lot of time on Zoom or on screens. what's the payoff of attending that event? It's not a technical question, but more of a sort of conceptual one. How you create enough value that people are going to make some kind of effort to go there and experience that, and then probably on the technical side, how you create enough relevance between in a hybrid situation from the real experiences happening or the IRL experience, and then whatever the remote sort of global digital version of that experience might be. A lot of gap in sort of the tech of that right now.
I think onboarding people into Web3 is another important barrier that has to be addressed. You know, if these events are in just a virtual space that's a click away, that's one thing, but if they're Web3 enabled in any way, that, you know, what you said made me think of incentivization schemes, and it's kind of like, you know, what we're developing as well is to try and encourage interaction and engagement in this new space that people aren't familiar with. And then that means onboarding people into Web3, you know, teaching them how to create a wallet and connect it, and yeah, that's going to be a barrier for anybody that wants to take full advantage of this technology that we're exploring.
Yeah, I agree. I see it from two angles: the consumer side, where I feel that we have a long way to go in terms of making that user experience simplified and frictionless. You know, I remember I had to speak at an alt-space event, and it took 15 minutes just for the tech issues to get me from the back of the room onto the stage. And so, you know, if I wasn't speaking and that was just me engaging in that space, would I come back in terms of the user experience? So I think for builders of events, really think about the partners that you have and what that user experience is going to be for the person coming in, because it's still very new. And for gamers, yes, it might be second nature, but again, we're looking at a majority of the population that may not be gamers that want to attend this event, so that's something. But from the brand side, you know, working with some clients, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm interested, I should have a corporate event, or I want to have this fun, entertaining event. Now what? So brands don't even know what that next step is. You know, should they hire a developer? Should they go into a spatial.io, a nowhere, an alt space? Should it be centralized? Should it be decentralized? Who's going to create this experience? So I think from a brand standpoint, just not having that person in-house or that go-to person, that metaverse person to talk to help guide them, I think that's an issue as well. So I think the interest is there, but then who's going to be the tour guide, so to speak, to help them bring that to life? So what would you say are some of your favorite use cases of events that you've seen take place in the metaverse, and why are they your favorite?
I like events that bring together, I guess you'd call them hybrid events, but events that bring together different locales. So if there's something happening in different parts of the globe all at once, we can use metaverse-based events to bring those different activities together over space and time with people who can and cannot be present at them. So whatever ways we're using this tech to do that is always exciting for me. I like bridging IRL. That's what we do at Non-Fun Events, you know, is try to bridge as seamlessly as possible these metaverse experiences with these types of interactions we're all having here today in San Jose, which are, in my, you know, they're irreplaceable. And, you know, I don't think we're going to, for another long time, be able to have the same interaction, even though I think the guy before us spoke said Ready Player One is the future. I agree, eventually. Even then, though, with Tesla suits maybe being affordable by some of us and having that haptic technology, the sensor convention down the hall was cool. You know, that when we do have that haptic technology implemented and we're able to shake each other's hands and look each other in the eyes, I still don't think that's going to replace what we've got here. So bridging IRL and the metaverse is really where I see the most value.
I like that.
Yeah.
How about you, Elliot?
I think for me, experience-wise, it's did a project with Burning Man where they had we had artists who had developed their own art projects, much like they do in real life within the community. And the fun of it was, of course, like seeing the artists build their piece, but the most fun was watching audience members come across the performance piece while that artist was in the world, and then having that artist explain what they were doing and why they did what they did. And you end up hanging out with people for 20, 30 minutes looking at different projects together, and you're these groups of people who are coming together and they don't even know where they're from. It takes like 20 minutes before you ask, where are you? And we're, wow, I'm so-and-so, wow, I'm such and such, right? And even to the point of, you know, there's a handful of art cars in the experience, so you could take people from one space to the next. So we'd sort of get a group together and then take those folks over to see the artist's work, right? So I think it was the depth of engagement that you got, the commitment that a creator had put into presenting something, and the time and energy and effort into it, and then watching them get to share that with people. Even when on some levels, some of these things seem so simplistic, that's not it. It's the emotion of that creator that's so fun to watch that get shared with the other folks. So.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that when a brand or an artist can use a virtual event to create an experience that is not typical in real world, that's a value add. So when we saw what happened with Travis Scott in Fortnite, was it 3 million in attendance, and that was just a proof of concept, right? Will people show up in a virtual world to see a concert? But then, as your avatar, you can actually go up to the stage and see Travis Scott on stage. That may be very difficult to do, you know, in real life. And then, or going backstage, you know, so maybe creating this backstage experience in the virtual world to add on to your physical event, I think would be a really cool thing to do. One world that I thought was really interesting was it was a very hyper-realistic world, and it was a conference like this, but think of this in hyper-realistic, 3D, and you could go through the conference, but then you can go outside, and outside was a view of Amalfi Coast, and you literally felt that you were in Italy, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then as you approached the stage, or there was a live DJ playing, so depending on where you were, you could hear music. So it was this really fun, immersive experience. And when you wanted to hear music, you could, and when you wanted to, you know, get the educational content, you could. And then because it was hyper-realistic, it really felt like I was there. So I thought that was really fun. So I think there's so many ways that you can think outside the box to bring these virtual events to life. Were there any events that you did not like? I'm just curious. Let's put it out there. And why?
Empty worlds.
Empty worlds?
Empty worlds.
Oh,
yeah,
empty.
empty worlds, right?
Yeah.
Here's the event. Where is everybody?
Or the 15 minutes it took just to get me on stage. Or another pet peeve is we were talking about digital assets and NFTs and fashion. And when you have to choose your avatar, this is part of the experience, and you have a limited amount of clothing items to select from, I'm just saying. And you're not representing yourself the way you want at this event, you know? Like, so that's an annoyance. So I think that's another thing that could be added into the experience. Do you feel that virtual events could eventually replace platforms like Zoom? And or how will Zoom reinvent itself? So two-part question.
I already gave my answer. I don't think you're ever going to replace the experience we're all going to be able to have here today. So, I mean, I think we can supplement it to a great extent and improve upon it, never really replace it. And I don't think Zoom's going to have the cutting edge on that, you know. Full disclosure, I still hold that stock, you know, but like, you know, that doesn't mean that I don't think that a large part of that, that their business is going to be taken by companies who can provide something that's more immersive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and do you mean Zoom as a brand, or do you mean company, or Zoom as an experience?
I guess
right?
both. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking Zoom as the experience. We're doing these
very good
Zoom-like platforms.
Yeah, that's
yes.
kind of how I was responding to it.
Yeah, I think you'll see some convergence, for sure, because the more video chat we brought into the experiences that we were building, the more immediately, intuitively immersive it was for people that weren't gamers, right? For people that suddenly got an emotional understanding of the other person instantly. So those artists and things I was describing earlier, those were all people that were seeing themselves for the first time, and the expressivity in their face, and not just their voice in some, you know, avatar's head, but an actual person and reacting, and that engagement. It's really easy for us. So yeah, I think there'll be some convergence there. You know, do you want to move around a space to showing things in a richer way? Help. It really depends on what you're showing, right? Whether you're just looking at slides, do you need to be around some exotic world? Or I remember there was remember hearing about a group who was hosting their meetings because they were so burned out from Zoom. They were hosting them in Red Dead Redemption too. And they would literally do the campfire thing, and they'd sit around the campfire with the wolves going off and the crackling, and then every once in a while, a bandit would come in literally, or a wolf, I think, would enter the space and grab one of the players, and but it gave it the sense of presence, right? And then you get that shared fun experience for it. So there's a lot of room for improvement probably in the video chat experience.
Yeah, I agree.
And that really brings up another barrier is virtual reality as a barrier to entry into these kinds of experiences. Right now, any headset you got is really wonky, and that's really the full experience is, when you can see and hear people moving around you. The only way to fully immerse yourself is with VR technology eventually, or mixed reality of some sort.
Yeah, how much do you want
easy.
to? Yeah, how much do you want to leave the space you're in for that necessarily?
Right.
Do you want to do all your Zooms completely immersed in another bubble, or are there other aspects of who and what you're around, or how do you share that experience? Of a person next to you, is something as simple as sitting with a person and watching a video or a movie or something like that. It's going to be hard to beat that if everyone's in a bubble.
Yeah, I agree. I see Zoom-like platforms being seen more as a feature that you can add into the world as opposed to just the end destination that we have now. And so if we're looking at that monitor, you can come into a movie theater in the virtual world, and it's that Zoom technology that's allowing you to see the movie, or maybe doing a yoga class in the virtual world. Let's see how that far that goes. Let's say meditation class in the virtual world. But you have the person leading the class, via video. So I do see that as in like an added value that's going to be brought into the metaverse as opposed to going away. But I do think platforms like that have to think on how they are going to evolve, to stay relevant. As we continue, as the technology that we're using to create the world become more sophisticated. And so I think it's something to think about. One of the things that I'm really excited to talk and cover is the connection between real estate, virtual land and real estate, and events, and how the two impact each other. Who wants to take a stab at that?
I'm happy to go. Well, so real estate feels mostly like a way to monetize adjacency, right? So in real life, it's location determines the value of that real estate. So I think in Metaverse, what one is hoping for is some kind of crossover of experience. So if I put my shop here, I'm going to get a certain amount of additional foot traffic that I didn't expect because I'm next to Pitbull's Metaverse. And whenever his party's over, people are going to wander by my shop, and I'm going to benefit from that. I think, I don't know if this is within the scope of the question, but I think it's pretty ad hoc at the moment, where it's when you think of Decentraland and sort of folks pouring in and hoping the winners and losers will kind of sort themselves out. It's probably kind of an extreme model as opposed to where it probably works best in real life when you have a certain amount of curation and you're balancing, what that city design is, right? What the design of the environment looks and feels like, so that you're something between totally decentralized and entirely centralized and controlled. There's a certain amount of curation that can go into creating a great community that can work out better than just the Wild West. Was there a second half of that question?
How they both impact each other.
How does it relate to events?
Mm-hmm.
So then I think events are just one of the drivers to eyeballs into an experience that then could leverage that with adjacency in the exact same way that you run an ad against a show today, right? So, but now that ad can be in fact a really deep immersive experience, for those brands. Or if it's a piece of purchased real estate, then someone presumably is hoping for some kind of tangential benefit to that, whether they're running commerce on there or they're hoping to promote their own experience or message or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think location's a big part of it. Which virtual worlds you're in, hopefully they have some sort of interoperability and ways to move between other worlds built in as we progress through this, and being near the excitement, always like the center of the map, wherever that is. Some of the virtual worlds that people are spending many millions on, there's really no clarity on where the center of the map is, where downtown is going to be. That's just being built kind of organically, like natural cities are. I'm just super curious. I mean, there's been such an interesting group of people in here. Like, can we just do a quick show of hands who owns any kind of virtual real estate, like any land in a virtual world? Just stick a hand up. Anyway, there's 2 people, 3, some reluctant hands, like they're questioning it. Out of like, you know, a good 60 people in here, I'm bad at judging how many people are in a room.
Who wants to own land?
Who's curious or like interested? Yeah. Yeah, right on. Another, like, I was like another 8, you know, that are interested and curious about owning real estate. There's other ways that owning a virtual real estate can be beneficial. It's like, you know, we were just at NFT NYC, and you know, the sandbox party there, the only way, well, not the only way, but the only reason we got past that 3-hour line to get into this exclusive event is because we were landholders, you know. We're premium partners in the sandbox, and that gets you past these lines. It's because there's this exclusivity afforded to people who hold it, and it's easy to track who owns that real estate. You know, you don't have to pull a deed up out of anywhere. You just, you know, connect your wallet and show the QR code, and boom. So there's different ways it can, it comes full circle, like the second half of that question said.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you have land, I think Snoop Dogg in Sandbox is a great example. If you have events can add value to that land, and they give people a reason to come back to that space, because obviously virtual land is infinite, right? And where is a downtown? Where is that go-to place? So events can be that go-to place that will create the downtown or create that destination within these worlds. So what would you say, before we wrap up, are your points to anyone that wanted to create an event? What would be those first steps?
Have a unique value proposition, bring your community into it. Hopefully you can leverage some sort of community underpinning to whatever your brand is in the first place to host the event. If not, make sure you've got good partners who can leverage theirs and bring that in early. If you want to make it immersive and tech forward, talk to folks like us at nonfun.events who can help you do that for your brand. Think about what your user experience is going to be like, just like you're building a product. Whether that's a Metaverse event or an IRL event, how are they going to experience it with all of their senses?
You stole my total answer.
User experience, right?
Well, which is, you've got a product, and the product is that user's experience of things from their point of view as much as possible. The more you know or have a sense of that community or who your audience is, more likely it is to be successful. And the more sincere and authentic you are about providing that value as well, you're more likely to get a genuine response. And not something you have to hard solicit or oversell, and people can look past quality issues or delivery issues or technical issues. They really pick up on the heart of the mission of what you're trying to do, the more genuine and the more you're making it even about the community, right? Thinking of like the successful NFT drops are ones that really know the community they're selling to, or educating them on, and helping them then be a part of the bigger picture. A lot of opportunities.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, for those that are interested in doing events, I would say, what type of event? Start there. Is it a workshop? Is it an internal event for your team, for your company? Is it to attract new consumers or an existing community? And then look at different worlds. See which world you think whoever's attending, maybe your team at your workplace or your external community, that they will enjoy that experience. And yes, we're talking about Decentraland and Sandbox and Roblox, but they're not the only players out there. There are really great smaller worlds that you can go to as partners and collaborators. And I actually recommend that, where you find several partners that are bringing their communities in as well, and then collectively you're creating this really amazing experience. Because at the end of the day, it's that experience that those that are attending that are going to remember, and they're going to want you to do it again. So look for partners, look for those worlds. I mean, some worlds are Mona, there's Rove, Metaverse, there's Nowhere, there's Spatial. I mean, these are other...
Somnium Space.
Somnium Space. There's Edge City. There's a ton of them. So look for some smaller worlds where you can speak to the decision maker, and together you can create something that's really unique and special. And then think about what you're offering. So maybe bring a DJ in, and that DJ has a following. maybe bring maybe a poet and have them do spoken word to open up the event. They have a following. So think about what elements you can bring in that's going to create more individuals to come into the space. And then the size of how many people can enter, we were talking about could be an obstacle. What is the capacity of that space? So if you are inviting, like this one event I went to, there was 1,000 people who registered for the event, but there was a limited capacity for that room. How are you going to accommodate all of those hundreds of people that showed interest? And so having that overflow option or working with the world, that can accommodate the number of people that you have registered at the event. Because it's frustrating when you're like, oh, I'm here, and I can't get in, and I'm on time. And so maybe there's a live feed on YouTube. But think about those things as well, because some of these worlds are limited in terms of how many avatars can occupy that space at the same time. So what takeaways you guys want to share before we wrap up?
Well, sorry to interrupt, but my last thought was,
Yeah.
it's actually said earlier, I can't remember, it was 2 meetings back, but it was pay attention to where you're bringing your customers in terms of where that data is going to go and be collected, and decide how much you really need that, the presence of that platform and the reach of that platform relative to the depth of what you're trying to build with your customer base. So as time moves on and there's more and more, say, wicks of the metaverse where you get to build your own pieces and build your own things, but really pay attention to what's that sign in, what's that off, like where is what's happening with the data around those customers. Because otherwise you're doing a lot of work for other people probably at the end of the day.
That's a good point.
Just think about that user experience. That's really what we haven't used the word experiential marketing, but really, I feel like we've got mostly a tech crowd in here, people who are building technology, but this discussion is almost geared more towards marketing folks that you guys work with and how to best reach the audiences that you want to. So we're recording it, we'll post it, and maybe share it with your marketing team, because bringing these folks together to think about how we're sharing these ideas and building these relationships is going to be important over the next decade, because we're building something huge here.
Absolutely, and we're still early, guys, right?
Yeah.
So give a little grace
Yeah.
to these worlds that you're visiting.
Right.
A little grace. But also, I recommend just go on LinkedIn and search which events you can attend and sign up and get that experience and try different worlds and see what you like. Because then as you're experiencing certain events, you're going to say, oh, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, I want to do this, I want to do that. So it's also going to help you shape the experience you want to offer as well. So those are my takeaways. So yeah, any questions from the audience? Everyone's just hungry. Tired, hungry? No questions? Going once? Going twice? Yes.
How do you see your future like concession stands, like other brands and other retailers coming?
Yeah, massive. I mean, even just for the event, folks that are putting on the events themselves, obviously, merch is the easiest one, right? Especially for an artist or a music group. How do you onboard them easily without having to move all their whole merch platform onto something else, right? It can be big headache. So how do you make that easy? But then that merch or that commerce experience can so easily flip into a full deep brand experience as well. So I think anywhere that anyone we're talking to is putting on an event, that is right at the top of the list about how to monetize what they're doing, how to offset that. In fact, probably for a lot of it, it's what's going to fund the project in the first place. How do I spend this guy's money over here? Because he wants, and how am I going to help him hit his KPIs with that event? So what are those, different touch points? What are the special things I can get? How are they connected to Web3 so that I get even more out of that? It's massive, I think, just like it is for a concert, except it's way more unlimited what you can build and what you can sell, and you can walk right up to a Mercedes vehicle and be talking to a salesperson who's configuring that with you and then giving you some special interactive drive experience or setting you up to go meet someone else. And that salesperson knows everything about you. It's not a dry walk, cold walk in like you get at the dealership and they're looking at you and trying to figure out, what's the angle here? It's like, no, I'm hassling the guy. You know, he says he's interested in cars. Let's be cool about it. He's got a family. All right, show him a minivan thing with extra doors. Like, I think there's a real opportunity for brands that are serious. I think the phrase earlier was, well, it was social to societal, which was a great one, but it was also like turning, you know, customers into community. You don't have to hit them over the friggin' head, or have a dry and honest sale like you do today.
The question was vendors and exhibitors and how to integrate that best into Metaverse events. That's great because, you know, at any type of event, even IRL events like this, they're often among those who feel like they're not getting the full value out of what they should have. You know, we're thinking about lead generation, thinking about networking and building some sort of genuine relationships. That's hard enough at a place like this, you know, where we've got to overcome our own social anxiety after 2 years locked up. But, you know, then add onto that a layer of technical challenges. How are those meaningful relationships established is tough, especially when we're thinking of the array of different types of platforms we're using to do this. Some of them you can just click a button and maybe it takes you to a merch stand on your website and it's that easy for them. Others, there could be automated process in the virtual world that allows, that can be built into that merch stand where you're talking to them, like Elliot said here, and you know, you're just getting these kinds of automated responses to help guide you through this process with an avatar. Or maybe they've got somebody at their headquarters in Stockholm that's you know, helping to drive this. I don't know where Stockholm came from. I guess I'm just eager for some travel. Yeah. But yeah, there's, you know, this is all technology driven, so the ways that it's going to be interacted, you know, the way that it's going to happen is going to be depending upon the virtual world that they select, like Nova said before. And it's really, that's such a great question for our one question we got. That's such an important part of events we go to, right? Are these exhibits and these merch stands, these vendors, and it's important that we drive that value for everybody that's involved. That's part of what we're trying to do at Non-Fun, with the Party to Earn mobile app, is to even try and incentivize and drive engagement and just using Web3 technology to do that. So we're always thinking about that as well.
I love that question because it just shows you if you peel away all the layers of what makes an event, you can insert yourself into any of those layers.
Yeah.
So maybe just be that concession stand at various virtual events.
Right.
You know, be that person that's selling the t-shirts for that brand at various branded events. So if you think about what we're doing in the real world, again, just overlay that in the metaverse. So that was a great question.
Yeah, it sure was.
Awesome. Any other questions? Yeah. And there's a mic here if you want to, if you're brave enough to go to
I'll
project.
I'll project. Kind of following off of that question, coming from a world of experiential marketing, not having KPIs or not having a lot of accountability. So let's just take commerce out of it. Say you're not selling anything. What KPI are you looking at, or do you think is most attractive to a brand? So I bring this up because if you look at like Gucci Gold, the first Gucci experience, everyone applauds it as this wonderful, great, innovative experience. But if you actually look at the numbers, I'm not talking about monetizing, but I'm talking about the numbers. It's probably one of Robux's least popular events. So I'm curious if there's like one number that you think would indicate the equivalent of like what impressions or things. Like if there's one KPI you're looking at, and we're not talking about.
I mean, I'll just jump in. What I've seen at the various events, right now, we're still in an R&D phase of the metaverse. So just building and creating a space and getting people into that space successfully is what I see as being measured as success. And you're right, most of these spaces, they can hold max like 50 people. If you get 10 or 12 people in the room, then it's like, woo, we've had like, there's a party going on over here. And because there are still these layers, these obstacles in terms of getting into that world, depending on the world that you're in. So I feel at least the events that I've attended and or spoken at within these 3D environments or those that are hosting them, the goal is there an interest? Are people willing to come, sign up, go through that process of getting an avatar, adjusting the avatar, and then figuring out how to use the space? I think that's more of success. And then everything else comes afterwards. So from a marketer standpoint, it's still like an R&D sort of level. That's my thought.
Yeah, well, I mean, in a lot of the early days, KPIs aren't meant to be the medium or long-term KPIs, right? We want to be the first to do it. Well, okay, it didn't matter how many people showed up. You did it. You got the example. You got it done before the second quarter. You met the thing you're supposed to do. We still don't know what to do for the next round. I think as long as Gucci's a great example. As long as you're still trying to show up in Roblox or in other metaverses for that reach, great. But it's almost like trying to put a Gucci store into a convention hall, and you're going to do it in a little booth, and you've got 2 people selling. Like the whole vibe and that whole engagement, like, is it germane at all to the brand or the brand experience? So it doesn't really answer what that KPI should be, but I suspect the early ones aren't. They're not the medium or long-term KPIs. I think where you see it make a big difference is when brands can build their own experiences that are on par with what and offer value beyond the novelty of it. I think that's when it'll get really interesting.
So I heard the question as what would be a valuable KPI for brands that are trying to be represented at events, but I believe it was also answered here in terms of like brands trying to build in the metaverse and what a KPI could be for that. And I think it comes back to the same answer sort of for both, as I was thinking about while you guys were speaking here, is like whatever the top of your marketing funnel really is it driving people successfully through that? And can you tie it back to that? Like, if you're trying to get them into your Discord, or if you're trying to get them to your website, your marketplace on your website, how many of those are actually stemming from the efforts that you're making with metaverse activities, whether it's being represented at some other event or trying to develop your own space like Infinite Reality is doing for what, did I say the name of the company?
You did, that was wonderful.
Infinite Reality.
Thank you.
That's my plug here.
That's your plug for me, I appreciate it. I gave him a 20.
This is marketing as its finest. Yes,
But also then what's that data, right? So what KPI options do you have when you do it on a third-party platform versus your own? And if you're not using blockchain to track what those folks are doing beyond that single event, then you don't have a lot to go on, and you don't have a lot of confidence as to what to do next. And you don't have a lot of data to curate it better, to go, well, which pieces did people look at the longest, and for how long did they look at them for? What were the demographics they used or looked at that? And did we gamify that? And so then the ads that didn't work get dropped over time, and by the end we had the best of new posters, and and we smashed it, and we just sat there and watched the numbers move. It didn't have to do anything. Yeah, well, we got a ways to go.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? All right, well, I think it's lunchtime. I believe lunch is being held in Hall 1, if I'm not mistaken, and